Jamie, it's always good to be here with you. And it's crazy because there's so much going on right now in both of our committees, in Judiciary and Oversight. And obviously on the Epstein files, you've been doing this work for so long, we both have. And it's crazy at this moment right now, we're in a shutdown. And Mike Johnson won't bring the Congress in because he does not want to see Adelaide Grijalva, who would be the 218th vote to get those Epstein files out to the public. This is a shutdown, not just about healthcare, but also about the Epstein files.
It's an Epstein shutdown all the way.
That's right.
Look, a discharge petition, people need to know, is a way that we get a bill out of the clutches of the leadership that they don't want to be voting on. And we've got a strong bipartisan majority that will want to vote on that. We've got 217 signatures on it, right? All we need is one more signature, and we've got that. In Ms. Grijalva, who was elected from Arizona, they're not swearing her in. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Crazy. I mean, and this is, I've been saying, like, stop the shutdown, release the Epstein files. And if people need to know that Mike Johnson and Donald Trump, they're scared of the Congress coming back because they're scared of the investigation in both of our committees. The reality is that our institutions are all being attacked. We know this right now. And the work that Judiciary is involved in and the work that Oversight is involved in are critical. I can't think we are the tip of the spear, our two committees. I honestly believe in keeping Trump accountable, saving our democracy, saving our justice system.
Look, they're demolishing the healthcare system in America, and they are, and we're fighting it. They shut down the government, and they did, and we are fighting to reopen the government. But we can't lose sight of the Epstein file because that is a story about profound corruption of the judicial system, of the legal system, and the way that the rich and the powerful get to exploit other human beings, prostitute other human beings, and get away with it because of the way that they get to work the system. And what's the opportunity here is that normally our Republican colleagues don't care about that stuff at all. They're willing to wink, wink with elite exploitation of the legal system and the criminal justice system. But here, they campaigned on opening up the Epstein files. And so this is one where their own people are looking at them to see whether or not they're serious. And Donald Trump was saying, release the Epstein files. Then they deployed 1,000 FBI agents to go look for Donald Trump's name and his picture in the photographs and the videos, and came back and said, looks like he's all over it. And then Trump says, we're not interested anymore. We want to sweep the whole thing under the rug.
Now, it's a complete betrayal. I think that's when you say release the Epstein files during your campaign the entire time, all your MAGA universe says the same thing, and then you completely flip-flop.
Yes.
And now you want to hide the Epstein files. The question becomes why, right? Yeah. Why are you hiding the Epstein files? Why did Pam Bondi say, oh, they're on my desk, and then, of course, now trying to hide the actual release? There's got to be a reason there. People forget, Donald Trump was essentially Jeffrey Epstein's best friend for over a decade.
Right.
Jeffrey Epstein has said this himself. He had a picture of himself and Donald Trump on his desk. That's how close buddies. And you're telling me that Donald Trump somehow now magically doesn't remember things, doesn't know who Ghislaine Maxwell is. And it's crazy. And I want to talk to you about this because, you're our leading, really scholar on the Constitution in Congress. This possible pardon of Ghislaine Maxwell, how outrageous is this idea that Donald Trump is even considering this, and that the DOJ is meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell on the side?
Yeah, it's so outrageous that Donald Trump, who's usually pretty outspoken about his corruption, here is speaking very carefully and says, well, I will consider it or I won't consider it. I'm not sure if I'm going to consider it. He knows that Ghislaine Maxwell could spill the beans, not just on Jeffrey Epstein and on herself. And remember, she never testified in her own case. She could spill the beans on Donald Trump and all their other friends. She's the one who could do it.
She wants a pardon. Supreme Court, of course, is not going to hear her appeal. The Oversight Committee is actually going to get Ghislaine Maxwell in front of us. At least that's the plan if Comer agrees.
Yeah.
So that's going to be an important piece of it. And I was going to ask you, Jamie, also, we're really focused on the bank record. We think the bank records are really critical. I know you guys have had some conversations about the financial documents in the Judiciary as well. What's the latest that you're hearing?
You're right. It goes way beyond just Jeffrey Epstein. We know that there were $1.5 billion worth of suspicious financial transactions that were flagged by the banks. And just to give you a sense of proportion here, our Republican colleagues demanded hearings and impeachment and all of this stuff because there were $20 million worth of SARS reports, suspicious activity reports from banks about Hunter Biden. And none of them has anything to say about that. $1.5 billion, that is a huge global sex trafficking ring. And so I introduced an amendment when we were last meeting in a markup session to demand subpoenas of all these documents, and all the Republicans except for one, except for Mr. Massey, voted against doing it. But we've got to get those financial records, and the bank presidents are all saying, "Oh, this is terrible. We would never do this again." And I wasn't there when it happened, and all that stuff. Well, if they really feel bad about it, they can just turn over the records to the Democrats right now, because we're demanding that.
And I think what the heads of the banks need to understand right now is, look, Republicans aren't going to be in power forever. And so they've got to be responsible to their members, to their shareholders, and understand that the truth in this case is critically important.
And the reason it's important is because this is an ongoing cover-up of crimes that took place, and for all we know, are still taking place.
That's exactly
today.
right. And we need to ensure, I think it was so critical that people need to understand that crimes can still be occurring right now. And who was involved, co-conspirators in this? When we heard from some of the survivors, one thing that disgusts me is their description of Ghislaine essentially grooming them. As one young woman who essentially Ghislaine met at Mar-a-Lago, who found her at Mar-a-Lago and then literally took her from Mar-a-Lago to meet Jeffrey Epstein to be sexually abused. And so there's so much information here that we've got to get, and our committees are working on that. The other thing I think is really, really critical right now around Epstein, and what people need to understand, is that there right now are so many women, girls around this country, around the world, that are looking at us and are thinking, is this going to happen to me and no one is going to be held accountable? Or will the people that abuse me never be held? Where is the justice?
Yes.
And so we have a responsibility not just to the survivors who have suffered, but to the millions of girls, young women that are out there across this country,
yes,
that either have been victims of sexual abuse or are wondering if the justice system actually is going to work for them. And that's, I think, a bigger thing that we've got to really think about at this moment.
We're dealing with a situation where there have been systematic sexual exploitation rings and conspiracies and institutionalized cruelty and abuse throughout the entire country. We're talking universities, colleges, elementary schools, scouts, football teams, soccer teams, basketball teams, volleyball teams. We're talking about churches, mosques, synagogues. I don't know that there are any religions that have been exempt from this crisis. This is institutionalized sexual abuse of girls and boys, young people, and then cover-ups that follow in its wake. And we've got to demonstrate that we're not going to allow any more cover-ups. And we have a bipartisan majority that's demanding real transparency here. And you're right, we've got to send the message that we don't accept this. Meantime, the Trump administration is dismantling the anti-human trafficking infrastructure of the government at the Homeland Security, at the State Department, at the Agency for International Development. They're making it impossible for the government to crack down on international human sex trafficking rings.
And all signs point back to the White House.
Yeah.
And so that's what this is about. And so I'm excited to continue this work with you.
Thanks for everything you're doing, Robert.
Thanks, Jamie. Of course, you too.
And we're going to keep going.
You too.